Noir plasma chrome bleed. Unlocking knowledge, inspiring innovation, empowering curious minds.
This website makes learning so easy. I found all my resources here.
Like what you share.
Welcome back to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously energetic journey through the overarching thematic pillars of William Shakespeare's work. You know, we're not just looking at the stories he told, we are mapping out the very architecture of his genius, all the way from the grand, bustling public stage down to the intensely private page, and finally, looking at the enduring legacy of his language. All right, let's just dive right into our roadmap for today. We're going to cover stage, genres, and tragedies, then adapting history with Julius Caesar, move on to the Fair Youth and Dark Lady sonnets, and wrap it all up with meter, rhythm, and legacy. Section 1. Stage, genres, and tragedies. Classifying the canon. So, we're starting on the macro level here. When we actually talk about the Shakespearean canon, we're primarily talking about the 36 plays preserved in the legendary First Folio of 1623, which was compiled by his colleagues John Hemminge and Henry Condell. Now, originally, these plays were categorized into 3 pretty strict genre boundaries just to organize his massive output. You've got the comedies. These are filled with deception, disguise, romantic misunderstandings, and basically guaranteed happy endings, usually sealed with a wedding. Then there's the tragedies, which follow noble protagonists driven by a fatal flaw toward a heavily foreshadowed, usually very bloody demise. And finally, the histories. And what's absolutely fascinating here is that his histories were so powerful at dramatizing national identity and political morality that they actually literally altered the real-world legacies of figures like King Richard III, cementing his reputation as a definitive villain in the public consciousness for centuries. But here's the thing. Those rigid categories, they actually weren't quite enough. Later critics, starting with F.S. Boas, had to invent a completely new term, the problem plays. We're talking about brilliant, bewildering works like Measure for Measure or Troilus and Cressida that just completely defy those traditional genre buckets. They bounce so abruptly between simple comedy and dark psychological drama that they leave audiences in this weird state of engrossment and bewilderment, often without any clear cathartic resolution at the end. Section 2. Adapting History, Julius Caesar. The Anatomy of Republic. Let's move to a specific case study to see how this builds in practice. We're going to focus on how Shakespeare adapted historical facts into a gripping theatrical tragedy with his 1599 masterpiece, The Tragedy of Julius Caesar. Shakespeare drew really heavily from Sir Thomas North's translation of Plutarch's Parallel Lives. But he didn't just copy history, right? He engineered it for the stage. Plutarch's original history spans months or even years, but Shakespeare intentionally compresses all that time to heighten the dramatic tension and create this inescapable sense of fate. Even more critically, look at how he edits the character dynamics. In actual history, Caesar distrusted both Brutus and Cassius. But on stage, Shakespeare removes Caesar's suspicion of Brutus entirely, focusing solely on Cassius's lean and hungry look. By doing this, he brilliantly amplifies the intimacy, the trust, and the profound bond between Caesar and Brutus. So why does that matter? Because this one singular dramaturgical change totally transforms Caesar's assassination. It elevates it from a mere political act of tyrannicide into a deeply ambiguous, personal shock of betrayal. The tragedy isn't just about the fall of a republic anymore. It's about the devastating violation of friendship. Section 3. The Fair Youth Sonnets, the lyrical catalyst. All right, zooming in from the public stage and those big political arenas down to the intensely private page, we turn to the 1609 quarto of Shakespeare's sonnets. Specifically, we're looking at the first 126 sonnets, which are addressed to a deeply idealized young man known as the fair youth. This sequence kicks off with sonnets 1 through 17, often called the procreation sonnets. They read like this prolonged, really urgent argument directed at an aristocratic figure who is clearly under immense social pressure to marry and produce an heir. Shakespeare frames biological continuity as literally the only way to conquer the relentless decay of time. But right at the end of the sequence, something incredible happens. When biological preservation seems insufficient or maybe unwanted, the poet executes this massive rhetorical pivot. He shifts from urging marriage to making a really bold, masterful claim that Shakespeare's own poetry will serve as the ultimate bulwark against time, granting the youth eternal life through his verse. Which naturally leads us to one of literary history's greatest unsolved mysteries, the dedication to Mr. W.H. Who exactly was this fair youth? Well, taking a look at the leading historical candidates, we have William Herbert and Henry Wriothesley. Both were earls whose biographies perfectly match the aristocratic context of the poems. But there's a massive contradiction here. Calling an earl Mr. back in Elizabethan England? No way! That would have been a profound, unthinkable insult, a surefire way to get a poet in really deep trouble. This gives rise to the logistical candidate, William Home. He was a publisher's associate whose commoner status perfectly fits that Mr. title, which actually suggests that the begetter of the manuscript and the romantic subject of the poems might be two completely different people. Section 4, the Dark Lady Sonnets, the anti-ideal. So, following all that intense devotion to the fair youth, the sonnet sequence abruptly and quite jarringly pivots in sonnets 127 to 154. Enter the figure known as the Dark Lady. The Dark Lady is this incredibly powerful, disruptive force, systematically subverting the high-minded spiritual devotion we just saw. The contrast between these two figures is honestly striking. The fair youth represents the established Petrarchan ideal, fair, chaste, driving the poet toward spiritual elevation. The Dark Lady? She is the chaotic, anti-Petrarchan reality. She has unconventional dark coloring, and their relationship is defined by overt physical compulsion, infidelity, and mutual deceit. She completely shatters that philosophical scaffolding of idealized love. And man, this just brilliantly illustrates his radical departure from the poetic norms of the era. With Sonnet 130, Shakespeare is basically using unflattering physical realism to intentionally violate literary expectations. He's constructing a totally new paradigm, championing raw, complicated human complexity and physical reality over abstract goddess-like worship. Just like with the fair youth, the historical hunt for the Dark Lady is fierce. Was she Amelia Lanier, a published poet of Venetian heritage? Mary Fitton, the scandalous maid of honor? Or maybe Black Luce, a notorious brothel keeper? While piecing together these Elizabethan scandals is definitely fascinating, the critical weakness across the board is a total lack of direct documentary evidence. Ultimately, scholars agree that her true, enduring power lies in her role as a subversive literary construct. She is the necessary dark force designed to force the poet, and us as readers, to confront the messy, agonizing realities of real human desire. Section 5. Meter, Rhythm, and Legacy. The Enduring Echo. Finally, let's actually pull back the curtain on the literal mechanics of his words. How did he build these timeless plays and sonnets? It really all comes down to this rhythm right here. Iambic pentameter. 10 syllables per line, alternating unstressed and stressed. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. It's like a natural human heartbeat, right? This rhythmic pattern was the absolute cornerstone of his blank verse. It was typically used to elevate the speech of noble characters, whereas commoners would often just speak in standard prose. It provided this organic cadence that made the dialogue flow naturally, while still retaining a sense of poetic majesty. But look, Shakespeare wasn't just a rule follower. He was a master technician who knew exactly when to break the meter for maximum dramatic effect. Let's look at the opening of Richard III. If he followed the rules perfectly, it would be a pretty flat rhythm. Instead, he shifts the stresses. Now is the winter of our discontent. By occasionally placing 2 stressed syllables right next to each other at the end of the line, he literally slams home the specific emotion of the character. He forces the actor and the audience to feel the heavy weight of that discontent right in their chest. And you know, his linguistic innovations absolutely did not stay trapped on the stage in the 1600s. With a staggering vocabulary of over 24,000 words, he fundamentally shaped the modern English language we speak today. Look at these phrases: star-crossed lovers, wearing your heart on your sleeve, knowing that something wicked this way comes, or musing that we have seen better days, and sweet are the uses of adversity. He gave us countless idioms that we use every single day to articulate our own complex human experiences, completely unmoored from their original theatrical context. He didn't just write for his time, he gave us the linguistic architecture to understand our own. So, as you go about your week, dropping centuries-old idioms without even realizing it, I leave you with this thought. Which of his brilliant, rule-breaking lines will you discover or perhaps rediscover next? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.
Like what you share.
This website makes learning so easy. I found all my resources here.
Noir plasma chrome bleed. Unlocking knowledge, inspiring innovation, empowering curious minds.